We are going to talk this week about Ratched, the new Netflix series based on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. We're going to talk about an animated series about Jurassic World on Netflix. We've got a new HBO miniseries, We Are Who We Are. A couple of talk shows, To Ned and Wilmore. One more for the kids, one for adults, and a new travel documentary show with Ewan McGregor called Long Way Up. TV news and reviews starts now. Welcome to TV news and reviews for the week. My name is Dan, and of course, we start off our news portion with renewals and cancellations, as always. So let's talk about some of the renewals. We've got a couple of the animated Fox series back on Sundays. Family Guy and Bob's Burgers, no surprise there, getting 2 more seasons. Family Guy going to its 20th season then, and Bob's Burgers to its 13th. I think I've seen in full maybe 2 episodes of Family Guy, and of course I've seen a ton of clips. My brother loves to show me Family Guy clips all the time because he knows I really don't like the show. So I've seen a lot of clips, but full episodes, I think I've seen 2 on Family Guy. Bob's Burgers I love, so I'm very happy to see them returning for another season. But, you know, look, Family Guy is kind of like The Simpsons, which I love The Simpsons, but at you know, season 30, 31, 32, you know, I don't know. Is it time to wrap it up? Some would say yes. I actually haven't watched a new episode of The Simpsons in a few years. The recent ones I've watched, like in the 22nd, 24th, 25th seasons, are still pretty funny. You know, so I guess if it's still getting the laughs, then all right. But for Family Guy to be on 20 years is a little insane. Real Time with Bill Maher. We talked about this a little bit last week, that show is the only of the late night talk shows where the host has not been under a new contract going through at least 2021. And sure enough, this week they signed Bill Maher to 2 more seasons on Real Time over on HBO. So he will be going through 2022 for that. So now everybody's to at least 2021, but I think there's even only a couple of those. Most of the hosts are contracted now through 2022 or 2023. I think Conan is up in 2021. I think maybe there's like maybe James Corden, but like Colbert's through 2023 now. I think Trevor Noah is through 2023. So there's quite a few that are contracted at least 2 extra years out. David Letterman, speaking of talk shows, is coming back for a 3rd season. For My Next Guest Needs No Introduction. This is the only one of Netflix's talk shows that has really sort of stuck around. Like, we've had quite a few come and go. We had the Joel McHale show, the one with Chelsea Handler. I think it was just called Chelsea. We had one with Hassan Minhaj, Patriot Act. That lasted a couple of years, but that's been canceled. The Norm Macdonald one was canceled after 1 year. So Letterman is really the only one that sort of sticks around, and I'm not sure why that is. I mean, he certainly gets bigger names, I think, than pretty much anybody else. I mean, he's had... I'm just trying to think of the first 2 seasons. He had Kanye on. He had Obama on. There was like a youngish singer that was on. Was it Alicia Keys? I forget, but not that Alicia Keys is like super young anymore. But I'm just trying to think. Like, he had some major players on, and so this year is only going to be 4 episodes. They're going to drop all at once. The first season it was once a week, and then the second season they did them all at once. But so this year they're going to do all 4 at once at the end of October. And listen to these guests. It's going to be Kim Kardashian, Robert Downey Jr., Lizzo, and Dave Chappelle. So, I mean, those are 4 heavy hitters. And I think Letterman picks people that sort of strike his fancy, you know? I mean, what does he know really about Lizzo? Well, you know, look, he's got a teenage son that is probably a Lizzo fan. And so he's probably delved into how important she is, you know, in sort of the feminist movement and the body positive movement and all of that stuff. Not to mention she's got a list now of of hit songs in just like a year and a half. So very cool. But obviously, these other people, Robert Downey Jr., Dave Chappelle, I mean, they have been around a long time. I'm sure have done many stints on the old Letterman show. And I like his style. I like the format of the talk show. It's just him and the guest and a live audience. But then also he does like some field pieces as well, going to either the hometown of the person, or something they're heavily interested in, a cause that they're interested in, and he goes and kind of experiences that in like little packages. So I really like the format of that show. So I'm excited that's coming back. And then Power Book 2 over at Starz. We talked about how there's like 3 new Power spinoffs coming to Starz, and Book 2 just debuted last week. Obviously the numbers were good enough for them to renew it for season 2 already. I'm not part of the Power game. I don't know these shows at all, but so I decided not to review Power Book 2 just because I don't know anything about the show Power, and I'm afraid I would be completely lost. So I don't know. Maybe I will review it if I look into it and see like, okay, it's a separate story. You don't really need to know about Power, because I'm not going to binge, the first 3 whatever seasons of Power that there are, just for the show. I'm just not going to do that. So I don't know, but maybe I'll review Power Book 2 if I look into it a little more and it looks like it's more standalone. Because I want to give things a fair grade. Like if I go into the Power Book 2 not knowing anything, well, then that seems a little bit silly, I guess, to try and give it a grade. So, but anyway, that those have all been renewed. So cancellations. Netflix has axed another 1-season show, Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. I was told by my buddy Joe to check this one out. This started a few months before this weekly TV review show started, so I just never got to it. And to be honest, I've only seen the Dark Crystal movie once, and it was like 35 years ago. Like, it was so long ago. Love the Muppets. We're actually going to talk about another Jim Henson production project coming up with the To Ned review. That's from the Jim Henson studio. Obviously, he's passed, but his son Brian is heavily involved with that. And I think maybe the daughter Lisa as well. But anyway, so we'll talk about that coming up. But Dark Crystal, actually, I know Lisa Henson is involved with stuff because she is the one that sort of put out the press release about this show ending. But yeah, another 1-seasoner down the tubes for Netflix. They have really, I don't know, man. They have restructured their viability for some of these shows. I mean, it used to be, if you got a show on Netflix, it usually lasted at least 2 or 3 years. But now that they are producing so much content, a lot of shows are going down just after that first season. And then the other one is sort of a surprise, but maybe it's getting a little long in the tooth, and that's Supergirl over on the CW. They have announced a final 20-episode Season 6 that will air presumably in January of 2021, when most of the CW schedule hopes to launch. It started over on CBS, did okay there, but at the time, the CW already had a couple of those DC shows going, and they're all owned by the same company. Like, CBS and CW are both owned by Paramount, so, why not just sort of reshuffle things? It's getting certainly less ratings over on the CW. I mean, the CBS has, some of the highest ratings in the biz, but one good thing about CW is their shows have a very, fervent fan base, even if they don't watch the shows live when they air. They have a lot of post-live views, whether it be on, one of the streamers, or through the CW app, or on people's DVRs or whatever. They used to air on Hulu the day after, but that contract expired years ago. So now the shows basically just go to Netflix once the season is over. So watching a CW show the very next day can be a little dicey, but look, the Supergirl fans, the Arrow fans, they will find a way. And I think a lot of them just do it on demand. But that will be done after Season 6. All right, so speaking of Paramount, the owners of CBS and many other things, they are getting a rebrand of the Paramount Network. Now, this came out of Spike a few years ago, I think 2018. It turned from Spike into the Paramount Network. And essentially, there were like some holdovers from Spike. They had like the Ink Masters and some of those reality type shows. Bar Rescue is one of them. Lip Sync Battles, that came over from Spike. And last couple of years, since they've been Paramount Network, they've really been trying to branch off into the scripted genre, and it's with some varying success. 68 Whiskey was canceled after the first season, a show that I did not review highly when I checked that one out. But Yellowstone, which is currently airing, I think its third season, is right now the most watched show on basic cable. It has beat The Walking Dead, which has been the number one most watched show on basic cable for a long time, probably since Breaking Bad left the airwaves in that last season. But Yellowstone is a powerhouse. So obviously they're going to keep that on. But they're going to shift focus to movies, and they're going to rebrand it the Paramount Movie Network, which is, look, names in basic cable at this point are meaningless. I mean, AMC was American Movie Classics, and now that runs Walking Dead, and, all of these scripted shows that have done well for them over the years. But, AMC still technically stands for, the American Movie Network. But, Paramount's going to be the Paramount Movie Network. God knows they have enough of a catalog. I mean, the studio has been around over 100 years, so they have a ton of shows at their leisure for free. But they're going to keep Yellowstone on, and they have a few other things in the works. They already sort of greenlit 3 different shows or miniseries, and they're going to keep some of the miniseries or limited series content going. So there's a Jessica Chastain miniseries in the works that may continue on that channel. Also, there's a show called Mayor of Kingstown that is supposedly likely to stay there. There's a Michael Chiklis show, though, called Coyote that was financed through Sony, and we don't know sort of where that's going to end up, if it's going to end up anywhere. It may be dead in the water. But Viacom owns a ton of properties. They own all of the CBS brand. So they own, CBS All Access. I've been saying Paramount, but it's really Viacom is the parent company of all of it. So, but they own, all the Nickelodeon channels, all the MTV and VH1 channels, Comedy Central, all of that. So, there's a lot of places for shows like this to go. Maybe it ends up being a CBS All Access original. I don't know. But another thing is, a lot of these networks have been going away from scripted programming for a while. Like Comedy Central is almost non-existent with original live action scripted programming anymore. They're focusing a lot more on adult animation. That is where the Daria reboot is going to be. That's where the Ren and Stimpy reboot is going to be. And, a lot of their long-time shows like Tosh.0 have been canceled. So, I think the whole Viacom world on cable is sort of trying to rebrand itself. And CBS All Access itself is getting a rebrand in 2021, which we talked about a few weeks ago. So on to people leaving their shows. So Liv Tyler is deciding not to come back to 911 Lone Star in season 2. And the reason for her is COVID related. She travels from London to LA to film that show, and she has just decided, in the current state, we're not going to do that. So she's decided to leave. But Suits star that I don't really know, I don't watch Suits, but Gina Torres, I pulled up her picture and I'm like, okay, I've seen her doing stuff, but I didn't watch Suits, but she's best known for that. She's going to take over for the season, but not for the character. It's going to be a different character written into the show. And the original 911 did that as well. They had Connie Britton in that first season, which is one of the reasons I watched it, because I love Connie Britton. And her character was written out at the end of the first season. But they have said, look, the door's open for Liv Tyler to come back if she, feels safe to do so. We're keeping her character sort of on ice for the time being, which is kind of nice. I mean, I only watched the first episode of that to review it for you guys, and I liked it. I continue to watch 911, the original show, for now. But the Liv Tyler character was fine. I find her to be a bit of a middling actress. But, some of the things I've seen her and I really liked, and then other times I'm like, oh man, she cannot act. But she was okay in this. I think Rob Lowe is the main draw for Lone Star, but maybe Gina Torres will bring some Suits fans over. But the one that really surprised me, the Kaminsky Method is going into season 3. It's a third and final season, and Alan Arkin has asked to be out of the show, so he is not coming back for season 3. I mean, it's just weird. I mean, look, Sandy Kaminsky is the title character, obviously, and that's Michael Douglas, but I've always thought of the show as a two-hander, really. I mean, I'm curious to see how they're going to continue the show with the same sort of pacing and back and forth without Alan Arkin. And it's interesting because this is a Chuck Lorre show, and we just talked, I think, last week about how Anna Faris is leaving Mom, which is a Chuck Lorre show, and of course Charlie Sheen left years ago. I don't think it's necessarily anything against Chuck Lorre, because, look, you had the Big Bang Theory crew intact for all, 11 or 12 years that was on the air. Obviously, Charlie Sheen is its own sort of thing with his mental breakdown and everything. So, I don't think it's necessarily anything against Chuck Lorre or, how they work over there or whatever. I don't know. Alan Arkin has just decided he is done. But he apparently let them know shortly after season 2 dropped. They just sort of didn't let the public know. But obviously, the writers and the crew and stuff knew ahead of time. So season 3 will not need to be reworked or rewritten or anything. They're just going to move forward without him, and that's news to us. But I guess they've known for a while. So, but I think it'll be interesting, to watch it without him. Some new voices for cartoon shows. There's been a lot of controversy, really for 2 or 3 years now, about some of the voice characters in animated shows, specifically The Simpsons, specifically Apu, but ever since, a lot of the Black Lives Matter stuff has really gained traction earlier this year, we had people like Kristen Bell, who does a biracial character on Central Park. She has stepped down. Some of the characters for Big Mouth, those actors have stepped down to make way. But The Simpsons was sort of the one that's like, okay, well, we're still going to roll with what we've got. Now, they haven't really had Apu on, by all accounts that I've read, for a few seasons now. Hank Azaria has stepped down from that character, and he announced that, a couple of years ago when that documentary came out, The Problem with Apu, or The Trouble with Apu, or The Problem with Apu, whatever it was called. But they still have a handful of their regulars that are white voicing different people. For example, Harry Shearer voices Dr. Hibbert. And he has done that since the beginning of the series, and he is going to continue to do that. But they found somebody for Carl, which was another Hank Azaria one. I think, look, Hank Azaria maybe, I think, because of Apu, is more attuned to that, and maybe he has gone to the writers and said, look, I don't necessarily want to do these anymore, but look, he still voices Bumblebee Man. I don't know how recently Bumblebee Man has been on the show, but obviously that is a Hispanic sort of character and stereotype. I mean, look, to me, I think animated voices, as long as, look, I can see why Apu is an issue, but somebody like Dr. Hibbert, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily, I don't think it's a caricature of a black man. He's obviously intelligent, he's a doctor, and he's not a silly doctor. That's Dr. Nick, who is white. So I think Dr. Hibbert is, a respectable African-American character, and I don't think the voice is, he's not doing, like a minstrel show type voice. So I can see why that might not be as problematic as some of the other ones. But Carl Carlson, Homer's black coworker, is now no longer going to be voiced by Hank Azaria. It's going to be Alex Desert, who you may recognize the guy if you saw him. He played on Becker for all 6 seasons that show ran. He was the blind guy, which, by the way, he's not blind in real life. So if we're talking about people doing things that they're not in real life, well, you've got that. But I actually know him from way back. Do you remember the TV show The Heights? And maybe if you don't, you remember the hit song "How Do You Talk to an Angel" from the TV show The Heights, which was a #1 hit the same week that the show was canceled, by the way. But I was real big into The Heights back in the day because I love the music. I have the soundtrack on both cassette and CD. But he played on that show when he was much younger. That aired in probably 1991. I think it was part of the 91-92 TV season. But so he will be. When I saw his name pop up, I was like, dude, that's wild. Like, I haven't even really seen him do anything since Becker. And even Becker was like 15 years after The Heights. So it's like every 15 years he comes into prominence doing something. But there's also another one. Cleveland is no longer going to be voiced on Family Guy by whoever it was. I'm not sure if that was a Seth MacFarlane one or who did Cleveland. It probably was Seth, though. Because I feel like I know who does all the other characters. And so this YouTuber, Arif Zahir, is going to be the new Cleveland on Family Guy. And that is starting with the brand new episodes that are going to premiere in a few weeks. For both Cleveland and Carl are going to appear in the premiere with those actors voicing them. And finally, reboots and spinoffs. I've decided to sort of rename it. Usually it's This Week in Reboots, but there's been so many spin-offs to talk about lately between, the Power spin-offs and Pretty Little Liars. We had a spin-off to talk about last week. But this week we have no reboots, but we do have a big spin-off, and it's The Boys. They are going over on Amazon with a college-themed version. It's going to be a college for young superheroes. And listen to the stats on The Boys. So Season 1 was rolled out all at once in the summer of last year. Season 2, which dropped like 3 weeks ago maybe, they're doing the every week kind of thing. And I think that's probably for the better because it's keeping the buzz going for this show. So listen to this. Season 1, which already debuted to some real high numbers, 4.1 million viewers per episode on that first season, the first 10 days. So that could mean a lot of people binged the whole season since they were all up at once, or just people checking out, episode 1 or 2 or whatever. But 4.1 million viewers per episode. Now, season 2 has seen an 89% uptick in the first 2 weeks of viewership. So that means these shows are getting about 7.5 million viewers per episode, which, broadcast networks would kill for those numbers. That would be 7.5 viewers within the first 10 days would be a top 10, top 15 show on a broadcast network. So the fact that Amazon Prime is getting those sort of numbers for a show, by the way, that is not a prestige show. Like Mrs. Maisel is a huge prestige show. It gets Emmy Awards. It gets a lot of buzz. The Boys, it's highly critically rated, but it's not like it shows up at the Emmys or anything. So this is, mainly word of mouth, mainly, people that love the first season wanting more. So I think it's brilliant that they made season 2 in a by the week per episode kind of deal, because it's going to make people tune back and back and back again. So I only ever saw the first episode of season 1. I reviewed it as sort of because it came out, again, a few months before I started doing this show. But in December, when there's not much new programming happening, I sort of, took a look at some of the earlier shows in the year that I didn't get the chance to see. And I saw the first episode of this, and it was really good. Very visceral, a little too violent for my taste maybe, but I'm definitely interested in it. And the reboot, I guess, is going to be in that same vein. It's going to be a TVMA. It's going to have a lot of violence, a lot of language, and it takes place at a college, so probably a lot of sex. So it's going to be in the same vein. Just because they're making it, a younger, younger characters doesn't mean it's going to be for a younger audience. It's still going to be, just as TVMA, I guess, as the original show. So yeah, man, that is a show that has taken off like a rocket. So very cool to see. I love Carl Urban, so I'm happy to see any of his projects succeed. And eventually, I guess I will check out that show. But let's move into our review portion. We have 6 new shows this week, and I cap it at 6 every week. But there's now that we have so many streamers. Last year when I debuted this very show, right in September, Peacock didn't exist. HBO Max didn't exist. Apple Plus, Disney Plus, Quibi. None of those 5 things existed. I don't usually review Quibi shows just because they're like the 7-minute shows or whatever, and I don't know. It just seems weird. It seems like they're just little, short bits or whatever. So I did review Reno 911 on there, the reboot, and I reviewed, is Quibi worth it as a whole, but I don't review shows on there. But they do have shows and movies like popping up all the time that I just don't get to. But those other 4, Disney Plus, Apple Plus, Peacock, and HBO Max. 2 of my 6 shows today are from one of those streamers, so it's like, it's a whole new world, man. But I cap it at 6, so maybe I'll get to some of these other shows that have already been released next week. I know, though, next week I want to get to I can hear I can see your voice, the reality show, and there's a few other shows that have premiered already in the last few days that I want to review next week. So we'll see how that works. But I had to get to Ratched. This is on Netflix, and this is a big hit for them. It's been number 1 or 2 every day since its release, and look, it's in the Ryan Murphy vein of things. We've already had one of the major Ryan Murphy shows on Netflix, and that's Hollywood, which I reviewed slightly positively. I think it was like in the B- type of vein when that came out a few months ago. But this is based on the character of Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, obviously from the book, and then the subsequent movie. And it stars Sarah Paulson as the main character, and she is one of the Ryan Murphy go-tos, back from, and probably before this, but the first time I saw her in a Ryan Murphy thing, because I don't watch American Horror Story. I know she's probably done a few of those seasons, but the first time I really saw her in a Ryan Murphy thing was when they did the OJ, People vs. OJ Simpson, where she played Marcia Clark, and it was like, dude, it was such a transformative performance, because I was around for that. I was in high school and college when the OJ trial was happening, so she had that character down. And I had seen her in things before that, but that was really the one where I was like, all right, dude, this gal is like legitimately like really good actress. She can transform into a character, and she does the same thing here. But essentially it is in the late 40s in Northern California, and nurse Mildred Ratched goes to a psychiatric hospital looking for employment, and she gets some static from Nurse Bucket that's already there, who is played by Judy Davis, who I also love from back in the day. She was in a movie called The Ref with Dennis Leary, which I love, and she's been in like a bunch of Woody Allen things too, but I love her from The Ref. So she is also somebody here that has just transformed into this other character, with the makeup and with her acting. But she basically gets some static from her, and tries to worm her way in anyway, because these weird, unsettling experiments have been happening at this place, and so she comes in and kind of presents herself as the perfect nurse. Hire me, and I will really, try to turn this place into something important. But at the same time, she is sort of making her own path and infiltrating the system from within. Finn Wittrock also appears here as a murderer, and the brother of Nurse Ratched, and he is an inmate at the hospital. And we also have some other names you might recognize. Cynthia Nixon here, and Sharon Stone is here as well, but I'm not sure if we see her in that first episode. But Corey Stoll, Vincent D'Onofrio, we definitely see them in the first episode. So there's a few things about this that you would recognize right away as a Ryan Murphy production. First of all is the lush setting, especially like right on the heels of Hollywood, which also takes place kind of around this time. This takes place in 1947. I want to say Hollywood takes place in the early 50s, if I remember. So it's like, certainly within a decade of this. Right away we notice that. We also notice the sort of over-the-top dramatic nature of it. It's very soapy. You can tell right off the bat, from dating back to like Glee. A lot of these Ryan Murphy productions are a little over the top, a little soapy. And the acting sort of falls in line with that. But what's interesting about Murphy is that he gets these actors and actresses that really do transform into their characters. So even if the characters are a little over the top, you don't necessarily say, oh, well, that's this person doing the over the top thing. You can recognize some of these people, by their names and faces, but because of the performances and because of the makeup crew, and the costuming and the period setting, you don't necessarily say, oh, well, that's Sarah Paulson doing her best Nurse Ratched. It's Sarah Paulson, but because she does have a distinctive face, but she really, it's like Tom Hanks in Saving Mr. Banks. Like, yeah, okay, it's still Tom Hanks, you can see that, but he does really kind of transform into Walt Disney at the same time, and that's just sort of my go-to. That has nothing to do with, well, I guess old style Hollywood, maybe it does, but but in any event, that's kind of my go-to for, like, famous actor that can really transform who they are, even though you still know it's the person. So I think that is sort of the best of what this has to offer. Now, I have not seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, so I know the basics, but I definitely can't speak to whether or not this portrayal lines up with the movie. Now, I think the movie takes place many years later from this, so I'm not sure if we would get the same character anyway, because obviously, people transform over time, and this is the sort of the beginnings of the Nurse Ratched character that people know. So I'm not sure if, how I feel about that as a detriment, but I like some things about it, but my initial issue on the first episode is that I don't necessarily like anybody. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to or not, but even, like, the people in the mental institution, like, I don't necessarily feel for them, and I think you kind of want to a lot of times, like, even if they're murderers, if they've got, a lot of serious mental issues or whatever, you could sort of at least be sympathetic, like, okay, well, it's not like they're murdering for sport, they've got a chemical imbalance or whatever, but here, you don't really get that sense even from the patients, and, you would maybe feel a little bad for Nurse Bucket for trying to do the right thing and seeing that maybe Nurse Ratched isn't quite all together, but at the same time, she is doing her own, like, things that are not great, so it's like, okay, you can't really sympathize with her. Now, that may change as the series continues. It's already been, by the way, renewed for Season 2. It was signed on as a 2-season deal, which makes sense with Ryan Murphy's history, with or without Netflix. I mean, he just recently got the Netflix contract, but he is one of the top names, obviously, in the industry. So no surprise there that they would put 2 seasons in immediately. But for now, I'm not quite sure how I feel about this. I like the panache. I like the Ryan Murphy style, but like Hollywood, I felt was at parts too much style over substance. I'm wondering if this is going to turn into that. But it's hard to tell from just that first episode. So I will give Ratched the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes I do that since I only typically watch the first episode or 2 of a series in order to, review it in good timing. So I'm going to leave Ratched with a B-, which is, like I said, I think about what I gave Hollywood. So, we'll see how it advances from that pilot. So let's stick with Netflix and talk about Jurassic World. This is an animated series called specifically Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous, and follows a group of 6 young teenagers. They're probably, I would say, hard to tell with animation, but just from the clues we've been given, I would say they're between 13 and 16. So none of them are like, college aged. They're all, I would say, like late middle school or high school aged. And they have been chosen for once in a lifetime experience at a new adventure camp on one of the sides, the opposite side, I guess, from the movies of Isla Nublar. And, some of our kids, like one was chosen because, his dad was like a heavy donor in the camp, so or in the amusement park, so he gets in. Our lead, I guess you could say, this kid Darius Bowman, played, or voiced, I should say, by Paul Michael Williams. He basically was the first person to win this Jurassic World video game, and so he unlocked the prize that way. And then we have Sean Jambrone, or Jambroni, I forget how you pronounce his name, who plays the lead on The Goldbergs. He voices Ben here, who is, a little sensitive kid, but a dino enthusiast. So he kind of makes friends with Darius pretty quickly. And then, there's a gal who has millions of followers on her, like, Twitter or whatever, so she got in so she could, blog about the experience and what have you. So there's other famous people you might recognize as voices. Jamila Jamil is here. Jenny Ortega. So, a few people that maybe you've heard of. Here I've watched the first 2 episodes. I try to do 2 episodes if they're just half-hour shows, but there's 8 episodes now available on Netflix, and this has been in their top 10 for a week and a half or 2 weeks too since it debuted. So, you've got that. But this is more of a serialized show. Which Netflix is sort of getting into the serialized animated game. Like the Fast and Furious animated show I talked about in like December, that is serialized too, which makes sense for the Netflix platform because you could just binge all 8 or all 10 episodes at once, whereas that's a little harder to do with like a Saturday morning cartoon or whatever. And the only thing I could really compare it to is like back in the day, like in the 90s, you had the Batman animated series, which maybe there were some standalones, but I feel like there was a mostly like, continuous thread of serialization throughout. So, they're doing that with a lot of the Netflix shows too. This to me was just not that appealing. First of all, I'm like way over the Jurassic thing. The first Jurassic World movie was pretty good. I think I probably gave that like a B or a B plus. It was good. But then Fallen Kingdom was terrible. One of the worst movies of the year. I'm not looking forward to this third one they have coming out. It's annoying because it's like, the premise makes sense in the first movie. And then it sort of maybe makes sense in The Lost World. And then it makes sense again in Jurassic World because then you're like 20 years later, whatever, 25 years later, okay, like let's return to these sort of premises. See if the technology is improved so the dinosaurs won't eat everybody. But then they just keep going with it, and it's like, no, the dinos keep eating everybody. It's like the same thing every time. So I'm really not looking forward to the new movie. And as a result, like, because this is in the same universe, it's on the other side of Isla Nublar from all the stuff that happened. Like, it's in the same continuity, same universe, so you're still doing the same jackass stuff with like little kids again. Also, so that's from a story standpoint. From an animation standpoint, the character designs are just very bland. Some of the kids, honestly, look like they were animated in the late 90s. Like, it doesn't look that far off from, like, I mean, it looks a little better than, like, Sid from Toy Story, but, like, I don't know how much, Like, people have been the hardest things, I think, to computer animate ever since the beginning of computer animation. Like, it took a while to get them pretty good. Like, the last 10 years, I think they've, the How to Train Your Dragon movies have some good-looking people, but these are very basic designs. I will say the dinosaurs look cool. They're designed cool, but it's still the same story as everything. Also, I'm not exactly sure who the audience for this is. Is the audience, young kids? Is it like, tweens? Is it teens that are in the same age group as these characters? Is it adults that love the Jurassic Park movies? Because I'll tell you what, there's not nearly enough action for that. I don't think it's made for adults because of that, and I think there's a little too, like, teenage drama kind of stuff between the characters. So I don't think it's quite for them. But I think little kids it's too scary for, because there's some real, I mean, in both the first 2 episodes like have some real peril situations, a couple of situations in each episode. I guess maybe the second one. The first one, maybe just the one situation, because the first one is more about them coming together, and meeting each other and stuff. A little more character development in the first episode. But I think it's too scary for little kids, and I think teenagers might be a little bored with it. Like, I have no idea who the target audience for this show is. Not to mention the gaping story holes. So I have to give this one a poor grade. I'm going to leave Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous with a D. I think this is just not for anyone, to be honest. Up next, we move to HBO for a miniseries called We Are Who We Are. They have it's a weekly show, as HBO usually does. So they've done 2 of them so far, or actually maybe they've done 3. Yes, they did the 3rd one last night. So there's 3 so far that have been on air, but there's 8 total. So we can have 5 more weeks of this show. And the essential premise is there's these 2 American kids who are living on a fictional military base of the U.S. in Italy. And it's set a few years ago, and we explore here, the common themes that we explore when we're kids, friendship, first love, school, identity, that kind of stuff, and being in a completely new place. So the main character is this kid, Fraser Wilson, played by Jack Dylan Grazer, who you might not recognize by the name, but he was the lead kid in Shazam. Or no, he wasn't the lead kid, I guess. He was the best friend of the lead kid, like in the foster home. But he was in It. So he's done, a few different things. And you would probably recognize him, by his face, although he's, dyed blonde here. But his mom is Chloe Sevigny, I think is how you pronounce it. I've never really known how to pronounce that, but you know her from a lot of things. Big Love being one of them. But she is a colonel in the military, and she's Fraser's mom, and she is a lesbian. Her wife is played by Alice Braga, and they're sort of getting their footing, on this new U.S. base. They've, not really been here before. They're trying to get their wits about them. They're trying to establish themselves in the core there. But also look after Jack. And then we have Jordan Christine Simon as Caitlin, who is this gal that Jack meets, or Fraser meets, rather. Jack's the actor, and immediately sort of is drawn to. We're not quite sure yet if it's a romantic drawn to. I would say it is, but hard to tell so far. And essentially, this series is just going to experience or experiment with their experiences on this base. And this is from the director Luca Guadagnino, I want to say is his name, and he's done some things like Sapricia, which was a very popular movie. I think it got an Oscar nomination for Best Foreign Film last year. But he also directed and wrote. He didn't write. He directed and produced Call Me by Your Name. And we see a lot of those same themes in here because this 14-year-old kid is really, of a budding sexuality, and he is sort of unsure of what that sexuality is. In one of the first scenes on the base, we see him sort of exploring the base a little bit, and he stumbles onto the shower room, and we see, full frontal male nudity. There's just, dudes showering, and they turning around like, hey, dude, like, you lost, whatever. And, he's looking at their penises and whatever. So I was getting some strong Call Me By Your Names vibes from that, which is a show I thought was movie I thought was very slow moving. And I it was okay, but I didn't quite see all the buzz about it. As a gay man, you would think I would love it. Oh, this is such representation, and they certainly got some things right. But man, it was a slow-moving movie. I think this one has a few of those slow-moving elements. I would have personally liked to see a little bit more in this first episode. And the other thing that sort of sticks in my craw a little bit about it is that Fraser has 2 moms. They are lesbians, and I don't care about that necessarily. I'm all for, obviously, representation, inclusion, that's great. But I think it's a little basic to make, the military, woman is a lesbian. That's very, that to me is cliche. That's overdone. It may have been more interesting to see him struggling with sexual identity issues while having, two straight parents. Not that they necessarily would have to be like militant, no pun intended, in the way of like hating gay people, but like just making them lesbians is just to me a little trite. So I'm definitely willing to move forward with this show. I think it's interesting, but I think we need to sort of nip a couple of those things in the bud. And I love the performances from these the child actors. This kid from Shazam, man, I think he could turn into something big. He is a great actor, and really, this is his. I mean, Chloe, Sevigny is, I think, first billed, but this is mainly his rodeo. And I think he's not a likable kid. He's trying to score alcohol, and he's trying to get away with all this stuff, and but I don't think that's the point. I think he's supposed to be realistic, not necessarily likable. And a lot of 14-year-old kids, especially ones that are uprooted and gone to a new place, I don't know if they're that likable. So I like the realism of it, but I certainly see some flaws from the jump on this show, and I'd like to maybe see those tightened up a little bit. So I'm going to leave We Are Who We Are with a B for now. But I'm expecting some interesting things to happen in these next few episodes. So up next, we're going to talk about Earth to Ned. We have two talk shows to talk about. One is more geared towards kids. One is more geared towards adults. And the first one is Earth to Ned. This is on Disney Plus, and as such, all of the episodes are up now. There's 10 episodes, and it's from the Muppet people. It's from Jim Henson Studios, the Jim Henson Company, which of course Disney owns. And we've already gotten one show off the ground from them recently, and that was Muppets Now, which I gave kind of a slightly positive grade to, but a little more middling, I think, than I would have liked. I love the Muppets. So Earth to Ned is basically a talk show. The premise is an alien from outer space comes to planet Earth to invade it and take over, but upon arrival falls in love with our pop culture and can't get enough, so he decides to host a late night talk show instead where they can beam people to his studio. And it's Paul Rudd who voices Ned. And you may not know, the voice or what, but I recognized the name immediately from back in the Tiny Toon Adventure and Animaniacs days. He was one of the voices on that. I don't know if he was one of the producers too or whatever, but so he goes back 30 plus years, in the voice work industry. And so I saw the first two episodes here. We had Andy Richter and Gillian Jacobs on the first one, and Kristen Schaal and Paul Scheer on the second one. And basically, each episode sort of has a theme of like him trying to figure out American culture, how to do things in America. So in the first episode, and specifically how to host a talk show. So the first episode, he had Andy Richter on as, classic sidekick of Conan O'Brien. And so he was asking him like, what does it take to be a sidekick? What do you need and stuff? And then in the second one, Kristen Schaal and Paul Scheer was more about how to be funny. So it's sort of, going off of that premise. And one thing I love about this show is that most of the conversations are improvisational. Most of it is unscripted. I assume probably the initial like greetings are scripted where they beam people down, and stuff. But once they get the conversation going, it's very scripted. And he has his own sidekick too. Voiced by Michael Oostrom or Userstrom or something like that. He plays Cornelius. And then there's also an AI voice on the spaceship that sort of looks like the magic mirror from the Snow White movie back in the day, and that's voiced by Colleen Smith. And that's really all. Like that's kind of the only people I guess that we see. But so the conversations are improv, which I think is really cool. I always like that. My only issue with it is that it doesn't seem like a fit to me for Disney Plus because I don't think it's really for kids. I don't think kids are going to understand it. I think the humor is going to go way over their heads. I think it's way too inside baseball about talk shows. I don't think they're going to recognize any of these celebrities. So it's for adults, and that's not to say there aren't things for adults on Disney Plus. I think the Jeff Goldblum show is certainly probably more geared towards adults. Certainly adults enjoy a lot of the things on there, like the Marvel stuff and the Mandalorian and stuff like that. But to me, the Muppets have always been like this all ages type thing, and they've tried to skew from that a couple of different times with varying success. I think the primetime talk show they did, or it was surrounding a talk show, but it was a scripted, just primetime series called, I guess it was just called The Muppets, right? And that was maybe a little more geared towards adults, but I think that was more geared towards families. I think that was family entertainment, much like the recent Muppets movies, the Jason Segel one, the Tina Fey one. I think, that's sort of where the Muppets has always sort of shown, is the family dynamic. Because even the original show from the 70s, adults would get some of the jokes that kids wouldn't get, but the kids love the characters, so they'll watch it. But here, we don't recognize any of these characters. This isn't Kermit and Fozzie here, So I just questioned who it's for. I guess kind of like I did with Jurassic World, that's sort of my thing this week, I guess. But personally, as a Muppet fan, as a talk show fan, as an Andy Richter fan, I found it to be enjoyable, and I love that it's improv. But I just am unsure who is going to really watch this show on Disney Plus. So I'm going to leave it with a B, because I do find it very enjoyable for me, for a Muppet fan and a talk show fan and a comedy fan. I love improv. I don't think kids are going to like it at all, though. Like, if I'm recommending it for kids, I would give it like a D plus. Like, I don't think it's for kids, but I enjoyed it. So up next, we're going to talk about Larry Wilmore's new show, Wilmore. This is on Peacock, and again, so here we go. Yeah, we had our Disney Plus show, and now we have a Peacock show. Neither of these shows we'd be talking about a year ago, as none of the platforms existed. But this is, look, not Larry Wilmore's first forte into talk shows. He did the nightly show for, I think, 2 years, maybe 3, on Comedy Central. That aired after The Daily Show, once Stephen Colbert left the Colbert Report. And so, look, he's no stranger to the talk show format. He's no stranger to political talk shows. This is rolling out once a week on Peacock, and like most things on Peacock, you can watch the first episode for free. Subsequent episodes will be with subscription to the service. I really do love that Peacock's doing that, so I can personally, I still haven't bought into Peacock, and I'm sure I will once I want to watch, full seasons of things. Like AP Bio Season 3 just went up. I would like to watch that. But for the purposes of this show and reviewing just the first 1 or 2 episodes of things, it's great. So I do appreciate that. But this is, in Larry Wilmore's wheelhouse. He also has been known for, his producing work. He's one of the executive producers and consultants on Blackish and The Office. So, the guy gets around. He is an intelligent person for sure. You could see that from the nightly show. So, this is a purposely placed talk show. It is going pretty much, it's not going live, but it's going to be produced weekly for 11 weeks. And that means it will go a couple of weeks past the election. So this is going to be a very political show. It is going to, talk about the issues of the day. The very first episode, one of his guests was Megan Rapinoe, or Rapinoe, who obviously, is an outspoken sports star, and has talked very much about equality and Black Lives Matter and women's issues. So that was an interesting conversation. And then he had on another gal, a black woman who I'm unfamiliar with, but she is in politics in one of the Midwestern states, and was very heavily involved with the Black Lives Matter stuff in her state. So they talked about that. They talked about the future of what that entails. And then it ended with sort of a comedy bit about, is this looting or is this reparations? And he did that with a gal who has an upcoming talk show on Peacock, which I'll probably review in the next week or 2 as well. But here's the deal. Look, if you like Larry Wilmore's comedy, if you liked The Nightly Show, I think you'll like this. Peacock is pretty much, I would say, given him full reign to do and say whatever he wants on his show. Because it's not on Comedy Central, he is letting the language fly, but it's not necessarily gratuitous. I think he just punctuates some things with F-bombs when he needs to and stuff like that. His interviewing skills, I think, are great. I didn't watch a lot of the nightly show because I got rid of cable shortly after that premiered, so I didn't see a lot of it. But here, it's just there's no audience. It's just him, and obviously part of that might be for COVID reasons too. But he's just in a studio by himself in a chair, and he has a big screen, where he can talk to the guest, and it's just like that. There's not a lot of there's not like laughter from the crew if there's a joke. It's stripped down. It's basic interview show. So that part I love. The comedy portion at the end, is it looting or is it reparations? I definitely could have done without that. But look, I get it. You need some sort of kicker if you're going to be a comedy interview show. But I personally think that this would be served better as a political talk show and not necessarily have any kind of, you can have a comedy rapport with the guest and you can be funny with them, but I don't know. I think Larry Wilmore's bread and butter is the political stuff, and I think I could say the same for Stephen Colbert too. Like, I think that's why the first 2 years Stephen Colbert really struggled in the ratings when he replaced Letterman, but then once he really started being political in the monologue, every night was an attack on Trump, this and that and the other thing, his ratings skyrocketed. People come to Stephen Colbert for political views. They really do. And I think Larry Wilmore is the same. I think that's why he's a consultant on Blackish. So I think he needs to sort of stick with that in the wheelhouse. Not to say that he's not funny, but I thought the comedy bit at the end was a bit hacky. So I'm going to leave Wilmore with a B. I think the interviewing is top notch. I think the last 6 minutes or so, 5 minutes, you could lose that completely and be better off for it. So, all right, finally, I'm trying to run through these last few because I try to keep these shows under an hour. So up next and finally, we have Long Way Up, and here's another one on a streaming service that did not exist a year ago when I started this show, Apple TV Plus. So another one we wouldn't necessarily be talking about, but it's called Long Way Up. And they are doing the Apple usual routine, which is to put 3 episodes up the opening day and then 1 a week after that. So there's, I think, 4 episodes up right now, but soon to be more. And I think there's going to be 10 total for this. And this is the 3rd in a series that I never knew existed. So in 2004, there was Long Way Round. And in 2007, there was Long Way Down. And basically it is a motorcycle travel show with Ewan McGregor and his best friend Charlie Boorman. Ewan McGregor, of course, you probably know from many of his movies. He was recently on Murder on the Orient Express, I think, right? Wasn't that him? But Star Wars fans, of course, will know him from that second trilogy. But he's done a ton of movies and things, and I find him to be a likable person. I think he's a good actor. So I was intrigued by this. I don't give a crap about motorcycles or really travel shows. Travel shows, I guess, are okay. It helps you see the sights that maybe you can't get to. But, motorcycles and motorcycle race and all that kind of stuff, that doesn't appeal to me at all. But we'll see. So it's called Long Way Up because this time they're going from Central America, basically in Argentina. They're starting up to L.A., and it's going to be over, I think they said 9 months on the show. So basically, they weren't going to really necessarily do a third one, although it was always in Ewan McGregor's mind. But then this Charlie Boorman almost lost his life a few years ago and had to get all these surgeries and this and that. So Ewan McGregor was like, okay, we got to make this third one a reality. Let's make it happen. So they're focusing now on this 13,000-mile journey, going on some non-gas related bikes. They're going to do Harley-Davidson electric bikes that have been manufactured specifically for this journey, for this show, and it went through last year, so they sort of just missed the COVID stuff. It wasn't 9 months, it was 90 days, so it went through September 2019 to December of 2019. So they did, it's 100 days. Okay, there you go. 13 countries total, 100 days. And there we go. So this first episode was literally all about how do we build the bikes? How do we make the bikes? How do we make them electric? What's the route we're going to travel? How are we going to do this? And like the first 5 minutes at least was background on the other two shows, how these guys know each other, which was okay for me because I didn't know the other two shows, so it was good enough background for me. But and the camaraderie between the two guys is pretty apparent. You can see that. But there was zero traveling in the first episode. They were about to leave at the very end of the episode, and it was a snowstorm in Argentina that day. So they were like, "Oh, this figures a snowstorm." So that was it. But like they did like a little test run on the electric car or the electric motorcycle. That was the only driving of the motorcycle we saw the entire episode. So the entire episode I watched was plotting the route and figuring out how to make the car electric. And I sense, because they've only foreshadowed it 40 times in this first episode, that a big issue they're going to run into is finding ways to charge the electric car on their journey, or the electric motorcycle, I keep saying car, on their journey. They literally, 40 is an exaggeration, but they probably mentioned it at least 20 times that I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. You know, to me that's just like, okay, well now you're just foreshadowing that every episode there's going to be a major issue where you can't find a charging station, and it's going to become the charging show, not the travel show. I try to be pragmatic in these sorts of shows that aren't made for me. They don't necessarily appeal to me in premise, and I never would watch them if it wasn't for doing this show. And this is one of them. Like, I would never watch this show. I don't care about motorcycles. I care mildly about traveling, I guess. But I certainly don't care about electric motorcycles and how they run, and let's find charging stations for them. So to me, this is like, okay, you know, but they're not traveling. In the next episodes, they will travel. But that means of 10 episodes, 10% is completely not traveling episodes. If you're a travel show, I think you need to travel. I understand that they need to make the motorcycles. That was mildly interesting. But I think they could have spruced that in. Like, we don't necessarily need to see Harley Davidson making the motorcycles on the way. Like, maybe if something breaks down on the motorcycle, or the first time they can't find a charging station or something, then they could sort of, okay, well, when we approach Harley Davidson for this, here's what they did to make sure, this was going to be a go, and this is how we can get around it because of what they did, whatever, make Harley Davidson look really good. I just would have liked to see some traveling in this first episode. For me, this was already a not appealing show that became less appealing with the immense lack of travel. I will say, though, that the camaraderie between these two gentlemen is obvious. I really found that to be an appealing thing. And I still like Ewan McGregor. I really do. He seems very affable. He seems like one of these dudes that you could just kind of sit down, the classic have a beer with. I don't drink beer, but, I drink a soda with him, whatever. Just sit down and chat and chill out. Like, he seems like that kind of guy. Which I think could probably be good for a travel show. But yeah, this for me missed the mark in many ways, and I don't see the subsequent episodes giving as much traveling. I think it's going to be a lot of like stop and go. How do we charge these vehicles that we've foreshadowed 100 times that we need to figure out? Because they didn't figure it out by the end of the episode, but they kept saying we got to figure it out. So I'm going to leave Long Way Up with a C-. I think if you love travel shows, if you love motorcycles, okay, this will probably be a higher grade for you. But even from a pragmatic perspective, this just, I think, missed for me. Maybe if I could have seen some of the scenery, it would have been a little different. But, all right, that's the show for this week. We are just about an hour here. I said we were trying to get under that, so there we go. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I've gotten 20 subscribers just in the last week because of my Masked Singer review, which is awesome. But I know I have fans of the TV reviews too. So if you haven't subscribed yet but you like these, please go ahead and do that. Comment below. Let me know your thoughts on these shows. And I will see you next week for a new episode of TV News and Reviews. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.